everybody. It's Friday. That means it's time for Box Seats, the end of the show, the end of the week show. And this is the show I talk about all the time when we talk about sports with comedians. We get ready to have a good time because, again, like I said, it's Friday. And it's the last day we get a chance to talk about sports until Monday. Today, talent is out. Fig's running late. Rodney Perry's on his way, but Mike Sean is in the building. Mike, what's going on, bro? How you doing?
What up, homie? What's good? Happy Friday. Happy Friday. We made it through another week. God bless.
I'm trying to
God
tell you.
bless.
My man Amir Sealy is also in the building. Amir, how you doing today, sir?
I'm good. I'm good. Happy Friday. TGIF. I'm with you, Mike. I'm glad we made it through another one, Doctor. So blessings.
Trying to tell you. So while we waiting for the other guys to join, jump in, man, I'm going to start with a couple of news items, man, that I saw, and to piggyback off of some of the stuff we saw yesterday, and hopefully we could have a debate about some of these things. But first, before I even jump into the rapid fire, man, Mike, I'm gonna throw this out to you. Yesterday, I threw this out, and this was not the topic of this yesterday, but I did throw it out there as a possible question. Let me just jump into the story real fast. I was telling everybody about what Jack Del Rio said. He's the defensive coordinator of the Washington Commanders, and I suggested personally that should he be fired. Yesterday afternoon, the NAACP Mike came out and said that they literally want him to be fired. They're putting forward with a movement for him to be fired. They're putting pressure on the NFL. They're even threatening a civil lawsuit against the NFL and the Washington Commanders if he's not fired for his comments he made about the Capitol. And they even went as far as to say that the players and the black players and everything else should be insulted. I personally thought the same thing. But there were some black players and some ex-players and everything else who came forward and speaking for him, saying how much of a good person he is and everything else. And I understand that thought process. But Mike, I'm going to ask you, man, where are you at on this fence right now? Or even are you even on the fence of this? What's your take?
I understand the NAACP doing what they're doing. I get it. I'm for it. I'm always scared when people get fired for their opinions, because I know that when we go down that slippery slope, basically Colin Kaepernick was blackballed because of his opinion on something and his stance on something, and we didn't think it was right. So if we didn't think it was right, why do we think it's right now to fire somebody? Now, I told you, I said, I would love to see how this is going to go down when he says what he said and then has to lead black men as a defensive coordinator. And I would be very interested to see what the black players, the players in general, what their response would be about him calling what happened at the Capitol a dust up. I think the Commanders are in a bad situation where they can't deal with any more bad press. I think they have. I think he almost forced their hand to have to remove him. The other thing is, Talent made a statement yesterday that was very eye-opening, where he goes, "It's funny how one statement can show you what a person's really been thinking the whole time."
That's very true.
So my thing with this is, if we fire him for his opinion, do we really fix anything, or do we make everybody with the same opinion just go really underground so that we never know what they really feel about circumstances? Now, I know I put a lot out there and I really don't have the answer for that, but all this really does is, let's just say you were for what happened at the Capitol. We'll just never know it. And you'll just hide this, you'll just keep this within your group of people. So we'll never know what you really feel about race relations when a bunch of white supremacists, in my opinion, raided the Capitol. So I don't know if that answered the question. I think he probably will be fired because the Commanders have no choice. But I don't know if I agree, because I don't want it to get thrown back on us.
Right.
That's all I'm saying.
Amir, Mike just said a lot. He had a lot to unpack. There's a lot he said there to unpack, to be honest with you. I mean, a lot. He hit several different points where we could talk about this for about an hour, easy, just on this topic alone. But on the surface, Fig's joined the show too. What's up, Fig? How you doing, bro?
Man, it's good to be here, man.
All right, okay, that's good to see you. Amir, let me come back to you. Like I said, Mike said a lot of stuff on the surface and everything else. But my question to you is, unlike what I asked Mike, my question to you is, if you are an NFL player, you're black and everything else, and you are on the side of obviously having Trump removed from office, and this stuff happens, and you obviously were against everything else, would you be comfortable in the room with Jack Del Rio, knowing he said what he said? Because like Mike said yesterday and today, he called it a dust up. You know what I mean? People were killed during that dust up. How would you feel?
Dust up,
Yeah. How would you feel?
I think as a player, you obviously you have to take that into consideration and understand that in all fairness, you are playing for and within a system. I mean, let's be clear about the system that, and the way that that whole program works. You're playing it within a system, as most systems that we play in, that are unfairly, the rules aren't necessarily for us and about us. And it sucks because we don't have an alternative. A guy like Jack Del Rio, who up until the point he made that statement, had been, somewhat respected, for his play as well as, his coaching ability. Now things are in question because, to Mike's point, when he's in certain circles, apparently he may be saying in and acting in a way that doesn't supposedly promote what football is supposed to be about, sportsmanship and all these other, the various things that you supposedly learn for playing the game. So I just think for a lot of players, it is probably going to be eye-opening. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Amir, your thing is acting up.
I think it's going to be eye-opening for so many people across the league, because now you're going to start wondering about all of the coaches. Jack Del Rio is not the only one who's going to, be put, his feet held to the fire. Certain guys are going to start remembering things that they heard in practice and things and start going, wait a minute, this dude say something that was out of line? So I think that this really sheds a light on a bigger problem that the league is going to have to, eventually deal with, which is all of the players starting to pay attention to these kinds of things. So it should be interesting.
I mean, I need you to back out and come back in because your connection was really terrible there. You're going back and out. But okay. Rodney Perry's also joined the show. Rodney Perry, how you doing, man? How's everything, bro?
Hey, all is well, man. Thank you for having me on, Frank Holder, Mike, Sean, and the great comedian Fig.
Okay, so before we jump to Rodney Perry, get his opinion on this, man, I'm going to ask Fig. Fig, what's your opinion? I'm going to ask you something different also than I asked Mike and I asked Amir. You got black men sitting in the room knowing this so-called thing was a dust up, a quote-unquote dust up. You got Amir saying what he said about Amir was on point too, how certain comfortabilities now certain these coaches are thing and everything else. My thing is, to you, being that you comedian Fig X, my thing is, should other players band together who are active players and do along with the lines of the NAACP did and try to get this man banned or fired from the Washington Commanders, or should they band behind their team and to create a common solidarity, amongst the team? Because like Mike said earlier, what you probably missed when you coming in, Mike said earlier that honestly, this can create a rift amongst the command because the Commanders right now have a lot of problems. Where are you at with this? What do you think?
I'm right there with Mike, man, because the team itself seems splintered even before this. I mean, they've been through so much between the owner and emails and him not wanting to change the name and defying what would be reasonable. And then to have Jack Del Rio come out and say that what happened at the Capitol was a dust up. I mean, Frank, you said it yourself. People died, and it wasn't the protest. Well, they call them protesters, but they were actually rioters. Their intention was to overthrow the government, and for him to just turn around and say that was a dust up. What, like, you would think to yourself, what is his mindset, and is he delusional, or is he on the side of the people who actually attacked the Capitol? And as like you said, as black men in the locker room, can you look at him with any degree of credibility?
That's true.
Like, I mean, that's delusional. Like you said, Frank, people died. They wanted to kill Nancy Pelosi. They wanted to hang Mike Pence, the vice president of the United States of America. They actually built a structure that if they found this man, they was going to hang him in front of the Capitol. And for a representative of your organization to call that a dust up, I can't imagine. Like, what could you think about a person who is supposed to be a leader of men? I couldn't follow a person like that. So I think the Washington Commanders have that as a major problem going forward.
Rodney Perry, I'm going to ask you something completely different. I'm going to ask you, if you're Jack Del Rio, let's jump into the mind of being Jack Del Rio. He literally said what he said. But can you see anything, I mean, any clarity at all on what point he was trying to make to try to compare? Because he was basically comparing, the Capitol thing to basically several incidents where people were burning down things and protesting. Can you see any clarity, or can you make us? I know you're black. We all black here. We're all minorities. Can you clarify anything from his so-called perspective of what he might have been trying to say? You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I've been a man, more than I've been a boy. And men historically misspeak. I mean, just being a man, most of us are viewed as toxic. If you 50 plus, you're viewed as a toxic individual. I have daughters that are, 19 and 21, and I'm the most destructive human being in their life. Although I provide for them and they pilfer my funds daily.
Ooh, boy, I wish I had a clip of this. Oh, boy. Go ahead, Rodney.
Jack Del Rio probably misspoke, but we don't know what those words mean to him. He 59. Dust up might be some violent shit. I mean, excuse my language. But I say this all the time in my act. Guys don't know how to communicate. I mean, he's dealing with football players all day, every day, and you put a camera in this guy's face and ask him about civil unrest and expect a quality answer. I say you're stretching it. I'm not letting him off the hook. He was wrong, but that organization is worse than Jack Del Rio. The Giants organization is worse than Jack Del Rio. So, and how about this? Is he white? Is he our enemy? Did he storm the Capitol? That would have been worse. If he was one of the people that stormed the Capitol. But how about this? Nobody's went to jail. We got tape. We got video. I refuse to demonize Jack Del Rio until we start throwing some of these white folks that was down there on the desk, on Nancy Pelosi's desk, in the damn hooscow.
Not the hooscow.
Again, a word.
Again, another word of the day. Rodney Perry is another word of the day. I ain't mad at you, RP. I ain't mad at you.
If I had a lighter, I would light it up right now. If I had a lighter, I would light my lighter up and put it in the sky right now. If I did.
For the hooscow.
Yeah. Mike Sean, man, we're going to jump it up to you, bro. You got the first dibs on this, man. We getting ready to jump into the NBA Finals because we got a game tonight, bro. And we're going to do some rapid fire questions. But I'm going to first start out with one basic question to all of you all, and then we're going to do some rapid fire questions about the finals. Then we're going to get to a lot of these other topics in the NBA, NFL, and everything else. Mike Sean, you got the first one up, man. First one up is, what are the keys to Game 4 tonight for the Golden State Warriors to win the game? What are the keys for the Golden State Warriors to win the game tonight?
Keep that ball movement. Don't get stagnant. Don't start forcing Steph Curry to be a superhero. Role players. You have to crash the boards. You have to. Draymond Green cannot be the only one left to go against a 20-year-old and Rob Williams and go against Al Harford. That means Looney. That means I don't even know if they're going to play Moody because he hasn't really got that much time, but that means Wiggins, you're going to have to help on the boards. That means everybody's crashing the boards because you're getting, when Golden State gets offensive rebounds, they're unstoppable. When they start getting more than 1 or 2 shots at a basket, they're going to score. Jordan Poole, you got to show up. It's just bottom line, you got to show up. I'm not talking about you need a 25-point game. You don't. I'm talking you need a 16, 17-point game. You need maybe 2 rebounds. Everybody as a group, and do not keep relying on these third quarter rushes. I know they're amazing. They're unprecedented. We've never seen a team do it before, but you cannot continue to think that you're going to blow out the Celtics in the third quarter in every game. Steph is the best player on the court. He's going to need everybody. And Steve Kerr, you got guys on that bench that are young. They may not know all the defensive sets, but you're going to need their energy also, because the reason why you took Steph Curry, from what I heard, out in the third quarter was because Steph Curry was gassed. So you may have to take a chance and go deeper into your bench. That would be my coaching advice to the great Steve Kerr, who knows a lot more than me.
All right, and Fig, on the flip side of that, if you're the Celtics, what are the keys for them to try to go up in the series? If you're on the Celtics side of things, what do you say these are the keys for the Celtics to win the game tonight?
You cannot be complacent because you're up 2-1 at home. The home court advantage is an advantage because you have the crowd and your role players generally play better at home. But you can't rest on your laurels. You have to play with force. You have to play with energy, because the other team is probably going to play like it's game 7, because to them it is. If they go down, if you beat them 3-1, the series is probably a wrap. So you have to meet what it is that they're going to come out with in the very beginning of this game, because they're going to give you everything they have. They have a championship pedigree, and you have to match their energy at the very beginning of the game. There is no resting in game 4, because to them, it's going to be game 7.
Right. Rodney Perry, you're Steve Kerr. Do you do anything different that you've been doing in this series to try to throw offset what the Celtics have ultimately started to do? If you're Steve Kerr, what thought do you do? Do you play other players that haven't been playing longer? I mean, what can you do to try to offset this to tie the series up tonight if you're on the Golden State side of things?
I want what's his name? God damn, it just jumped out of my head. Well, I definitely play Kuminga.
Okay, yeah. Yep.
I definitely play Kuminga, and Mike Sean alluded to that. I get Draymond under control. I need his aggression, but I need to be controlled aggression. I need Clay, but I mean, don't get me wrong, Clay had 25 points, but it wasn't the right 25 points. Like, I need Clay to be aggressive on the offensive side of the ball. And even if that means not just selling for threes, taking it to the basket, and I gotta keep the motion so they can't camp out under the goal. Big number 44 is under the goal all day, every day. You got to run that guy out of there. You got to get him on his wheels running. And they became a little stagnant, and it caused some trouble for them, against a longer, more athletic team. So I think Golden State needs to make some adjustments. And like Mike said, I'm no Steve Kerr, but he's got to get some young legs out there, I believe.
Okay, Amir. On the flip side of things, if you're Boston right now, what do you do to offset Golden State's powerful third quarter? Because Boston knows that Golden State is historically phenomenal in the third quarter. Tonight's third quarter could ultimately tip the game in their favor. If you're Boston, do you finally try to put together a game plan to stop that, or what do you just try to stop the bleeding? What do you say to the Boston side of things?
Well, I think there's two things. I think Boston, first off, now having seen not only it up close and personal. But if you look, like you said, at the history of their playoff run, the third quarter has always been a big thing for them. I think the problem has been for Boston is you just got to close the gap between the pick and roll. Doesn't make a difference. If they do the pick and roll out at half court, you got to close that gap, and you got to force whoever's going to come off that pick to either put the ball on the floor and drive to the basket, or you just got to close the gap and make sure that they don't have room to move. Now, whether or not Boston does that, obviously, it remains to be seen. And then the second thing I think that they have to do is continue to not panic. The one thing that I have to give Boston credit for is so far in the series, even when Boston has gone on these runs in that third quarter, they don't seem to panic. And that's, paramount in terms of them being able to hopefully sustain enough or, stay close enough so that going into the fourth quarter, they still give themselves a chance to, win the quarter and possibly win the game. So those two things I think is going to be paramount for them.
And one more quick thing, Frank. One more quick thing. Real quick. For the Golden State Warriors, when you see Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown pull the ball out and they're about to go one-on-one, can somebody help? Like, obviously, these guys are pulling the ball out because they know they can get to the basket. Well, if you see that and they're making it that obvious, can somebody help on defense and maybe double team and force them to move the ball and get the ball out these guys' hands?
And I'll just throw this out there, too. If I'm Golden State, I would, and I'm one of the coaching staff members, I would say, the zone is not working. The zone that you all are playing right now, the collapse, is not working. And I know you all are suffering going man too, but I would try less double teams at the top of the key and probably more so be so worried about cutting towards the basket. That's what I would say. And they probably are saying all this stuff too.
Yeah, I'm sure they're saying that, Frank. They were blitzing those plays at one point too, and they stopped doing that. They were soon as Tatum, because you gotta think Tatum goes sprouts to the game without touching the ball. Yeah. And they got to figure out how to make that happen again, because they've done that several times in this series. So, man, this is by no means over, and I don't even think it's over if Boston wins tonight.
Yeah, but
I don't see that.
The thing is, the most important thing if you're Golden State is you got to get Draymond working. You got to get him passing the ball. You got to get Draymond to shoot and hit the shots. You got to get Draymond to distribute all around everything else. And you got to get Draymond to stay in the lane, because Boston is clearly pulling him up and everything else and letting him shoot wide open. He's missing the shots. He's clearly not doing his thing. But if you're Boston, everything's working for you, because even though you're up 2-1, it can still easily switch. But everything's working for you because obviously Draymond is the key that you're focusing on. He's the one distributing everything, if that's what it is. Go ahead, Fig.
Right.
The one thing, if I was Golden State, that I would focus on is stopping Jaylen Brown. People talk a lot about Tatum. Jaylen Brown has been the catalyst. Right now, if I had to vote, if Boston was to win, I'd give my MVP vote to Jaylen Brown, because he was the spark in game one. Game two was a blowout, so we can't even talk about that. But game three, Jaylen Brown, when he puts the ball on the floor and he drives to the hole, he's been damn near unstoppable. That's the one that I would focus on mainly, because when he gets going, everybody gets going. I mean, people say that Tatum is the best player, but I'd focus on Jaylen Brown, because when he gets going, something about the rest of the team, they just sort of rise with the tide of Jaylen Brown.
Yeah,
everything you said was right, Frank, about Draymond. But I don't like Draymond, like, just because of his antics. But it's unfair because Draymond, like Golden State, Draymond can't be the only guy responsible for being physical. He can't be the only guy.
Yeah, they gotta have a team. Their whole team has to become more physical.
Yes. Like the dude is by himself out there in a gang fight right now, and somebody else has got to step up and push somebody and maybe throw an elbow or two. Not that I'm for elbows, but it is what it is.
Right now,
we all know a good dust up.
Yeah, we all know I'm a Celtics fan, right? So I'm trying to be fair. But I will say this: my only thing I've had throughout the entire NBA playoffs whether the Celtics are playing or not, is all I ask for is in the game tonight is the NBA officials to be consistent. I just don't want it to be, like I was watching the Memphis series, Memphis Grizzlies series, and some of those fouls called there were horrendous. Then I watched the Phoenix series, some of those calls there were horrendous. And then you get a couple of series where nobody's calling anything. All I ask for is just let's be consistent in the NBA. Playoff. That's all I ask.
They already inconsistent. They're already proven to be inconsistent. But
all over the place.
I tell you what's consistent. When you get to Boston gonna catch some calls.
You could say that about either team when they get to it. Like Golden State got some calls too, bro. Like you can't even do that, Rodney. You can't do that because there was a phantom call that was called on Jaylen Brown in Game 2 that took him out of the game literally in the second quarter, and he clearly didn't touch Gary Payton Jr. He clearly didn't even touch, and they showed it from every camera angle. He didn't touch him. Took Jaylen Brown out the game. He sat on the bench, and Boston was making a run at the time. The whole game switched when he goes on the break because, like Fig said, he was the person who was hot at the time. He gets second foul, he's gone. This semantics right now. All I'm saying is, let's keep it. Let's just keep it.
Oh, I'm a firm believer in the conspiracy theories. I believe that the refs are at the center of it too. To be honest.
Yeah, they definitely want 7 games.
I second
They
that.
definitely
Of course,
want
they want 7 games.
So Mike,
I want 7 games.
Mike, we're getting ready to do a rapid fire, man. And well, I'm gonna start the questions. I'm gonna start with you, Mike. LeBron James officially became a billionaire. LeBron James is the man right now because he's the first. Now he's the second active player with Tiger Woods this morning got officially crowned to be a billionaire too. Do you think the NBA should allow an active player to put in dibs to be an NBA owner, especially an NBA? Now, let me make sure I'm clearly stating this question so you clearly understand. Somebody who's on the back end of their career like LeBron James, and do you think that helps or hinders the NBA for an active player to become a minority owner in an NBA team? Especially if, let's just say LeBron James is playing for a Las Vegas team and they created Las Vegas team and he could be an owner of the team. Do you think that benefits or behooves the NBA? And what's your thought process on an active player owning an NBA team?
I would say absolutely not. It opens up too much room for collusion. It opens too much room. There's no way you can be on the team and then have control of the salary cap. You can't be a minority owner and then you can start dictating what price you get paid. So then you're a minority owner. You can either get all the money or you can shortchange yourself so you can add more people to your team because you're making money off the team. Mm-hmm. Like that opens the Pandora's box of all Pandora's box. Just wait till you retire. I think LeBron will own a team. I think he will be more than a minority owner in a team. Congratulations to him and congratulations to Tiger Woods.
Okay, so Fig, I'm gonna throw this question out to you. On LeBron James being a possible owner, let's just say LeBron James is now retired. Let's just say LeBron James now, because LeBron James is a minority owner in the Red Sox. He owns a soccer team and everything else. He's trying to get everything else. Do you think it is a great thing for LeBron James to own an NBA franchise as a retired player along with Michael Jordan and everything else? Or do you flee on the flip side of people who are sitting there saying it's not great for potential NBA ex-players to start owning teams because then the NBA collective bargaining agreement will probably start to say that some players might eventually want to have a piece of, ownership in some of these teams moving forward 15 years down the way. What's your thought process?
I that's kicking, pun intended, kicking the ball down the field a little too far. I think it does great for the NBA to have a former player as an owner because think of it this way. When we see other franchises, like say fast food, Burger King, whatever, Domino's Pizza, your franchises. When a person starts from the bottom, as an employee, and they work their way up to where they can actually end up owning a franchise, it looks good for that company because it shows upward mobility. So I don't think it would be any different from the NBA. The only problem I think that you would have with players wanting a piece of the team or piece in the ownership of the team is that it sort of throws the balance off a little bit. I don't have a problem with it after you retire or when you're done, because then you have what's called like tampering. Like right now, players talk to each other or come to my team, or I'm going to team up with this one, or let's go play over here, go play. If you have partner or part ownership of a team, that starts to lean towards collusion. So at that point, I don't think that is really good. But afterwards, absolutely, I'd love to see LeBron James as an owner. I'd love to see Magic Johnson and anybody else who has the financial wherewithal. I'd love to see Shaq possibly get, if he's interested. He's in so many different businesses. I'd love to see Shaq, if he'd be interested to own a team. I don't see anything wrong with that at all. As a matter of fact, I co-sign it. I applaud it.
All right, so Rodney Perry, the NBA and the NBA Players Association have started a collective bargaining agreement this year. Right now, it's literally underway. They're trying to get this collective bargaining agreement done and wrapped up by the time the next NBA season starts around. The NBA players right now literally could all band together and say, you know what? Since there's there's ownership out there and everything else, we want to see if we can get some of that minor, maybe 0.5% and maybe 1% of that and everything else, maybe be divvied up amongst all the players. They could ask for that. Not saying that that they'll get it, but they could ask for that. Adding more NBA players to ownership, does that make sense to you to be able to do that? Are you on the side of what Fig's doing? Are you on the side of, if you all start doing that, they're going to ask for a little bit now, and every collective bargaining agreement, the amount they're going to ask for is going to get more and more and more and more. Is it a Pandora's box you're opening up? Where you say that on this topic?
We live in America. Part of the American dream is ownership, entrepreneurship. I don't think active players should be able to own a team, but I'm all for anybody in America that's got the money should be able to buy whatever they could buy. Now, we know, especially when we talk about the NFL, that there's a stigma with NFL and being a person of color in ownership. It don't happen. We've seen in the NBA minority ownership, people like Michael Jordan. You see Steve Smith with a group buying a team, right? And they basically use people like a Jay-Z or LeBron James as a glorified season ticket holder, in my opinion. But at the same time, as these guys make more and more money, because we're in uncharted waters with LeBron touching his Billy. So as guys make more and more money, they're going to want more and more large assets, right? Mm-hmm. And so I don't see nothing wrong with a guy that's giving his blood, sweat, and tears to a league being allowed to potentially have some ownership. I would like it to be more than a small amount, but I'm not allowed to watch their pockets either. So I mean, to answer your question, I think that absolutely former players should be allowed ownership. Period.
All right, Amir, your brother played in the league before his untimely death and everything else. I can only imagine what he would be saying right now. With LeBron James, you got Michael Jordan, you got all these NBA players and everything else. Being that you rubbed elbows with a lot of these NBA players for a very long time, probably firsthand about the collective bargaining agreement. Where do you see the collective bargaining agreement in the future, next 10, 15 years, going along with this, with more players asking to own NBA ownership in teams? And where do you see the potential of NBA ownership going along the line of active players? You know what I mean? Not just players, active players. Where do you see that?
Well, I think to everybody's point thus far, first of all, trying to play the game and be an owner, there is a lot of gray area there that probably is too massive to really have rules in place and things in place to really be able to maneuver that space. I think the big thing that we're gonna that you're probably gonna end up having is all of these amazing players who, through collective bargaining, and especially now with the way the world is set up, I mean, ownership appears to be a major part of everything. Don't forget now, so many of these players are getting branding earlier on in their careers, even as early as high school and things like that now. So they understand the power of themselves and what they're bringing to the table. So I think that's going to have to be factored in because, like anything and everything, stuff changes. The way things were set up, just to switch gears for a minute. I remember when they had the lockout and the strike. If y'all remember a couple of years back, and a lot of the players, if y'all remember, had to go back home and had to do so many different things that might not have happened under other circumstances. So I think after having come through that, the players really understand now that they have to do a better job of understanding and having financial literacy so that they don't find themselves in those same kind of situations. So I think that you're definitely going to see a push towards some sort of incentive that allows the players to, as time goes on, and especially as they get to the later years in their careers, be in a position to eventually own teams. And I think as far as, like I said, playing and having ownership at the same time, I think that's just too gray an area for them to be able to regulate at this particular time. So they have to really work on that if that's ever going to come to fruition.
Amir's breaking up. Amir, you're breaking up again.
I'm breaking up again?
I was hearing him.
Oh,
all right.
Okay.
I heard him.
Amir, you're breaking up
Me
again,
too.
my brother.
I heard him.
You
I
have
heard
to
him.
figure out. You heard him? Okay. As long as
Yeah, I heard
the general audience heard him, because he was
Okay.
breaking up on my end a lot. Mike, on the flip side, to get this situation very ugly, because this situation is very ugly. Let me throw something out there to you. Mark Jackson, because just came out a week and a half ago. Mark Jackson literally has been banned from the NBA for coaching, because we all been sitting here trying to figure out, why is Mark Jackson banned from coaching? What's going on? Everything else. It came out literally a week ago. We just didn't talk about it on Box Seats. Is that Mark Jackson spoke badly about the ownership and called one of the owners of the Golden State Warriors gay because he found out that he was gay, and it was against his religious beliefs. Now, here you have now with the situation with NBA owners getting ready to obviously be some of these ex-players. If this happens more often and we get some of these ex-players to get more in ownership, what do you think happens to the old boy network? How do you think that fits along with that? And any other potential problems that can come with that if players like Mark Jackson are allowed NBA ownership? You know what I mean? Some shares in the NBA ownership.
Yeah, I heard about that, him being banned. I guess that's not the New Boy Network. I guess it's the New Boy Network, not the Old Boy Network. And I think
maybe, yeah.
yeah, and I think Mark Jackson was still talking as one of the old boys the way we did, and we said a bunch of inappropriate things. I wish the story would be talked about, and I wish Mark Jackson would answer these questions, but maybe that would make things worse. Yeah, I think his chances would be better if LeBron was an owner. But then again, Michael Jordan's the owner, and it didn't change anything over there in Charlotte. And I think Mark would have done wonders with that team in Charlotte. There's always a story within a story.
Right.
So until Mark Jackson answers these questions openly, if he ever does, I mean, the guy's got a sweet job right now. The man runs around, talks about sports, makes millions of dollars. I'm sure he does want to be a coach, but until he comes out and clears things up and clears his version of Jack Del Rio's dust up and clears whatever he said up, I can't really take either side. But yeah, I would think common sense would tell you if there were more black owners, he'd have a better chance. But there is one black owner in there, and he still hasn't gotten a job over there either.
Right. So, Fig, here's another question for you. Pertaining to the same thing, they kind of connect. Zion Williamson, right now, New Orleans Pelicans Vice President David Griffin calls Zion Williamson a max player, says extension is an easy decision. Two questions here. Does this type of stuff happen if we have more minority ex-players who are owners? You know what I mean? Do they, it's no problem. Does the money flow easier now to these players because now ex-players are now part of ownership? More of them are ownership. Or is it more harder for them to get their max?
Frank, you froze.
I hear him fine.
I hear him.
Yeah, Fig, you froze on my end. So, Fig, you there? Fig, you there?
Somebody tag him back in.
Yeah, he said afros. All right, so let me throw this question to you, Rodney Perry. Why figures it out? Why we get figured out? If there's more minority owners, we got Zion Williamson right now. He's a max player. He says extension is easy decision. If there are more minority owners, who are ex-players, is it easier for these pros to get these max deals? Is it easier or more difficult for them to get these max deals? Because NBA owners who are now ex-players can see through the BS. You know what I'm saying? You see where I'm going with that? Because there are a lot of people who have issues with Zion Williamson getting injured a lot. Right now, the GM said, it's an easy decision. But if there were more, let's just look at it like this. If there were more owners who are ex-NBA players, is that decision so easy? Fig, I'm going to come back to you with a different question in a second. Rodney, question. Go ahead, Rodney. What you got?
I'm trying to process what you're asking.
I'm basically asking
with an owner that's happening.
More guys are owners, ex-players on that side of the fence. Does the deal get easier or less hard for players like Zion, who people have been complaining about because they're like, yeah, he chipped his toenail and this dude sat out for 6 months. You get my point?
Right. I mean, when you start dealing with people's pockets, regardless of their nationality or whether they're black or white or purple or green, well, not green, they're gonna find a way to get their money. You know what I mean? So even a owner of color is going to be looking at his bottom line, and if the bottom line, and how about this? It may even be tougher. It might even be an ex-player may even require a more strenuous test. You know what I mean? As ex-player, you can't pull the wool over my eyes, dog. Your ass need to get out there and play. You know what I'm saying? So you may have that with ex-players. It's not necessarily going to be a cakewalk just because you have a ex-player. And what does that imply? That implies that just because you black, you don't know how to run a team. I push back on that idea, and I also push back on the idea of blacks being minorities in America. That's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, it definitely is. Fig, the question for you is NBA owners now, obviously, if there more of them are ex-players and everything else, how do you think it sit well with them seeing active players be in the media? Like you got Patrick Beverley's talking about being an active player, talking to media. You got CJ McCollum, you got Draymond Green, and more players now. I'm not even talking about ex-players who are on the media because obviously they can't control that. But how do you think being an NBA ownership would go if them seeing more active players talk on ESPN about other active players, i.e. Patrick Beverley talking about Chris Paul and how do you think that sits?
I don't think it's a problem because what is actually happening is these guys, something that they've never been able to do in their earlier years, man, is set up for a life after basketball.
Yes.
And this gives them something to do after their NBA career is over, because the truth be told, there are quite a few exceptions to the rule of players that can play into their late 30s. You got the LeBron James, the Chris Paul, but the vast majority of guys are usually done right in their early 30s. But as a man or as a athlete, you're still very young in the broad spectrum of things. 35 is extremely young as a person, but as an athlete, you're old. So you got, what are you going to do? You're just going to retire and sit around and do nothing at 35 years old? No, these guys are preparing for a life after basketball, a la what Tom Brady set up to have multi-million-dollar contract after he decides to retire. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. As a matter of fact, I think it's smart because unfortunately, a lot of basketball players or a lot of athletes, period, when their career is over, they go broke. So that, they need, a lot of them are going to need something to do, whether they have money or not, to last them for the rest of their life.
Amir, Udon Haslam said basically that Patrick Beverley broke the unwritten rule by talking about another active player and everything else like that. How does that situation sit with you, knowing that NBA ownership, NBA active players right now could potentially bump heads if more minority and more NBA active players obviously get some divvied up into this NBA ownership and everything else. Does that sit well with you? And does Udonis Haslem have a point? Like, did he cross the line by having active players talk about other active players in the media? Or do you feel like with Fig, and do you say, you know what, it's great, it's par for the course, it's a great thing? Where are you to that?
I think, you know, this current climate of opinion, because a lot of it is, you know, obviously also opinion. The Patrick Beverleys of the world, and some of the other players, like you said, Draymond Green and so forth and so on. To be honest with you, first and foremost, I think is great, because I think what's happening is, too, we're getting an inside look in real time. You know, sometimes when you have the ability to look back over the course of your life, good, bad, and indifferent, and, you know, maybe earlier parts of your career, you may or may not remember them as you tell the stories. That doesn't mean that you're right or wrong. It just means maybe your version of it may or may not be, you know, correct. But in real time, if you're telling your stories, then it's in real time. So we really get some insight. For a guy like Patrick Beverley, I just think he's a comical dude who, in all fairness, let's just be honest. If it wasn't for him giving this kind of commentary, we probably wouldn't care about Patrick Beverley until next year when the season starts and we see him back on the court. So he's allowing himself to sort of stay relevant. As far as the effect that it may have on ownership, and it may have in terms of the league, as a whole, like anything, I just hope that none of this is taken personal and cats don't allow entourages, because usually when there's situations that escalate to the spaces that they escalate to, is usually not between the actual combatants or the people who are having the it's entourages, it's the cousins, it's the friends, it's the boys, and people that hang on. So I just hope and pray that we don't see any of that kind of foolishness arrive from what's going on.
I want to get in on this. I think it's great that Patrick Beverley has nothing to worry about. Nobody likes him. Nobody likes him in the NBA.
I love the guy.
No. I mean, the thing with the other players is people just they don't like him. He doesn't care. He's fine. These microphones, I've been doing radio for 25 years. These microphones are very dangerous. CJ McCullough's in the prime of his career. He has to be very careful in things that he says on that microphone, that he doesn't say the wrong thing at the wrong time to get him in a mix of something that he wasn't expecting. I've seen many veteran radio people who have been in the game lose their jobs over what is said on that microphone. And sometimes you get too comfortable and you start going all the way in and you start crossing lines when you're still in the middle of that game. Mike, I think CJ McCullough is amazing and he's going to have a great career. I just don't want him to get trapped in with Stephen A. Smith and say something that he lives to regret that you can't take back a second later.
Mike, it's even more worse than that, which I don't think people realize either. He's also the new president of the Players Association, speaking on all the players right now, and that's the worst part to me, because now you got the Players Association president of speaking for the players, now also being an active member, speaking against the players when asked about them literally in prime time on ESPN. I honestly, if I was a player, I'd be like, yo, why is this dude our president of the Players Association? Even though, yeah, he's journalism major, he sounds great and everything else.
He's great. He's great.
Yeah, he's great. But I'd be like, why is the Players Association president who speaks on my behalf also doing commentary on ESPN, and they're purposely asking you questions that can be comments about, derogatory comments, or, to pull about other players who are active also. I would be like, yo, that should be completely taken off the table. Right. If I'm them, that's what I would do. You know what I mean? But what do I know? You know what I mean? What do I know? I'm just a guy sitting here. So, go ahead, Frank. You want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think either it was yesterday or the day before, somebody asked him something that was along those lines, and he said, because of my position, I really can't answer that question. And then Stephen A. Smith said, hey, listen, because he has this position with the NBA, he's not at liberty to speak freely on that subject, and that's why he declined to ask. And secondly, Patrick Beverley is today what Charles Barkley was years ago. And that's what made Charles Barkley so popular, because he was willing to take risks and say things that was kind of unpopular and what we would call today clickbait. And that's what made Charles Barkley so popular. So Patrick Beverly might be onto something.
Yep. I think that did Frank freeze now?
Frank froze.
Oh.
I froze him.
Frank froze.
I'm gonna say this. I absolutely love Patrick Beverly. Who? I froze?
You good now?
Yeah, you're doing
good
a whole
now.
bunch of kung fu
We can
movie
hear
stuff.
you.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
All right. I don't know what's going on. I don't know if it's my connection. I don't know. I purposely like Patrick Beverly. I think he's a great commentator. I don't have a problem with that. My only problem is having active players speak on ESPN. I even though I love it as a fan, I just think if I'm an NBA player, I think I'd have a huge problem with the active player being. That's what I think. Go ahead, Mike. What you gonna say?
But I do love the fact that CJ McCullough and JJ Redick embarrassed Stephen A. Smith live on air and went at his freaking neck. And they did it in a polite, concise, articulate way where even Molly was looking like, we probably should go to commercials.
Redick is good. JJ Redick is good.
Yes.
JJ Redick is good.
Well, I missed that. What happened? I missed that. What happened?
Well, it was a whole
Come on,
thing
go
where
ahead.
Stephen A. did this whole diatribe basically on Russell Westbrook, saying Russell Westbrook shouldn't have been at the press conference for the new head coach.
For him, yeah.
For him. And CJ McCullough and JJ Redick basically undressed them on how ridiculous a statement that is. And of course, Stephen A. Smith tried to detour the conversation by answering the question in a 9-minute answer, trying to get everybody to forget exactly. And CJ McCullough went as far as to say, run the tape. CJ McCullough said, run the tape. That's what I was saying. God, I felt like I was at church. I was like this. I was like, finally, somebody said run the tape on his ass. He didn't run the tape.
All right, we back.
I gotta go look at that. I'm gonna go look that up, bro. I'm gonna go look that up. See,
You
being
got
that,
to. You got
Oh, it was hilarious.
yo,
It was
I
hilarious.
appreciate you guys, joining the show. I had some stuff about the NFL I want to talk, especially with this Tom Brady tampering situation. But being that the show's almost wrapped up, man, talk to me about what you guys got going on this weekend. I'm gonna start with you, Rodney Perry. Where you at this weekend?
I got I got some new Jergens, man. I'm gonna be at home.
Only Rodney Perry would do that. Fig, what's going on?
Oh my
this weekend?
God. Hilarious. What you say, Frank?
What you got going on this weekend?
Me, tomorrow, I'm in Long Island. I'm doing a bishop's anniversary. He's been a bishop. I forget how many years it is. I got to look it up, but I'm doing a bishop's anniversary here for this big church out here in Long Island. So I drove out today. I'll be here today, and tomorrow the festivities will kick off.
That's dope. That Mike.
I'm not doing anything this week. I'm taking my girl out on a date, which means that means I have thoroughly screwed up something in the family. So I'm taking her. We're going out. We're going to be going for the weekend this weekend. But the weekend after that, I'll be in Atlantic City for the Black Excellence Festival. So I'll give y'all more details next week on that.
Nice.
Everybody have a great weekend, y'all.
Yeah, y'all do the same thing. Amir, thank you for joining the show, man. Just standing by for talent. What you doing this weekend, Amir? What's going on?
I'm just out and about here in the city. I think there's a few festivals going on here in the city, so the weather's beautiful. So I'm gonna get out, just be out and about and check and see what's really cracking in our city this weekend. So I'll be around.
Thank you for sitting in. Rodney Perry, thank you, man. Fig, thank you. Amir, thank you. Mike, Sean, thank you. You all, thank you for doing the show. Talent will be back next week. Dave, the bully the business bully should be in next week sometime. Thank you all for joining the show. Y'all have a safe weekend. Thank you to all the watchers, the viewers. Thank you all for sharing the show. Especially, we have some dedicated fans, man. I want to give a shout out to all our fans, especially who are continuing to watch the show daily. Like I really need to thank all of them. One day I'm going to get it listed. I'm going to have to do that this weekend. Get a list of laying all of them individually. And of course, it all started with Sharonda. You know what I mean? And thanks to Sharonda, who rest in peace. That's my girl. I appreciate that. Y'all have a good weekend. We go out to be safe this weekend. It's hot. It's nice. Y'all be safe. We'll see y'all. It's box seats. It's on Humor Mill. We'll see y'all soon. Y'all be safe. Be cool. And we'll see y'all. Peace.
Peace.